This course will help you learn how to use Selenium WebDriver to automate web applications, and you will use Java to write your automation code. I write automated web tests using Selenium WebDriver because it's the best tool I've found out there in the wild for web automation. A lot of people like test automation tools that write code for you, or capture playback tools to make it easy for you to create some basic tests. I don't do that. I work in production environments, testing web applications where we write lots of tests and they have to be maintainable and run fast. And I use WebDriver for that. And that's what I'm going to teach you on this course. How to program Selenium WebDriver using Java to write robust tests and give you the skills and knowledge you need to work in a production environment. The very thought of programming sometimes puts people off, and it shouldn't. You don't have to know much programming to get started. And the benefit of this course is that you'll see me write code. I'll talk you through why I'm doing things and explain some of the gotchas from using this tool in the real world. Selenium WebDriver is a library and a tool. To get the most out of it, you have to program. It's that simple. On this course, I'll walk you through the API and cover advanced stuff like page objects, abstraction layers, and synchronization strategies. The stuff you need to know if you're going to write tests for a production environment. But I know some of you are starting from scratch, so I cover how to install the tools you need: Firefox, IntelliJ, Java, Maven, and I'll explain how they work and what they do. You can download the source code used in this course, so I'll also cover how to load it into an IDE so you can run the tests. Now, I've been using WebDriver for a fair few years now. My name is Alan Richardson. I'm a test consultant. I make my living by testing software and helping other people test software better. I write about testing at EvilTester.com, JavaForTesters.com, SeleniumSimplified.com. I also talk at conferences, and you can find the talks and videos for those at compendiumdev.co.uk. And I want you to understand that you're going to be learning from someone who uses this tool in the real world. And I use this tool because it works, and it works well. And if you watch the videos and work through the exercises, by the end of this course, I'll have passed on a lot of experience that I have spent years learning. So I don't just cover the API. I've organized the API into high-level categories like navigation, interrogation, manipulation, and synchronization to make it easier for you to remember, because that's how I remember, and that's how I think about the automation I'm building. Navigation, how to open pages and move about the site. The very basics of web automation. Interrogation, how to find the elements on the page using XPath, using CSS selectors, and how to work with the attributes in the DOM, things like that. Manipulation, how to click on things, how to use drop-downs, how to work with alerts and frames, how to use user interactions for drag and drop and more low-level interaction with the web application. Synchronization, how to make sure your tests wait for the right things, and different ways of doing to explain the options open to you. All the types of things I say to people when I'm working as a consultant and sitting down and pairing with them coding, I say on this course. This is real world stuff we're dealing with here. Once you understand the basics, we cover stuff on the edge of the API. That helps finish off your automation work, like how to deal with cookies, how to use JavaScript in your tests. We'll cover how to run your tests on different browsers like Chrome, Opera, IE, and how to use a grid so that you can run your tests on different machines and take advantage of different browser versions, or use in the cloud grid providers so that you don't even have to set up a grid on your own machines. We also cover real world stuff like how to build abstractions to manage your drivers, taking screenshots, and how to run tests and continuous integration. It's not strictly WebDriver, but people want to learn it, so we cover it on this course. I spend quite a long time on page objects as abstraction layers and synchronization, because the biggest issue I see with people's code in production is not synchronizing their tests properly. So they write brittle tests that fail intermittently. And I want you to learn how to avoid that so that you never encounter that issue and that you write robust tests from the start. There's probably a lot of stuff on the course I haven't mentioned because we do cover quite a lot of stuff and I do add more things on the course. But this is all practical. There are a lot of exercises. If you work on them, then you will learn hands-on. And if you get stuck, I show you on the course my answers for the exercises so that you can check your approach against mine. I explain them in the lectures. After you work through the exercises, by the end of this course, you will have a solid grounding in using Selenium WebDriver to automate web applications, and you will be ready to use those skills in a production environment. Hi, my name is Alan Richardson. This is just a quick intro video for me, so you know who I am. And I've been working in software testing since about 1993, that's 20 plus years, and yeah, there's grey hairs and everything. And I guess what's really important is that over that time I've been pulling in information from all the topics that I study and mapped them all back into testing. And if you read my blogs or look at the conference talks and articles I've written, then I'm hoping that you'll see that. And I called my company Compendium Developments because it's a compendium, it's a compilation, a summary of a larger body of work, a hub for all the stuff that I do and learn and develop and try and communicate to other people. Because I think we should keep learning and keep improving and keep trying new things. And we decide what works. This is one of the underlying philosophies that I have. We decide what to do next. We can take inspiration and guidance and possibly influence from other people, but we don't follow. We carve our own path, and we need to develop our own skills and ideas in order to do that. If we stop, we stagnate, so we don't do that. We don't stop. So over the years, I keep learning new things. I keep improving my technical skills. I keep trying to pass those on to other people. I don't limit myself to someone else's definition of what a tester does or what a test manager does. I want to add value on projects, and I need a range of skills to do that. I need to keep improving and updating my skills so that I can continue to add value on projects. So I want to help improve other people and help other people improve their skills and help them test better and help them recognize the skills they already have and apply as many of them as possible to their testing. And that's pretty much what my stuff is all about. I mean, I've been a commercial programmer, a tester, test manager, head of testing, test consultant, trainer, yada 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 yada. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I don't think the labels are really that important. If you want a CV, then you can have a look at LinkedIn. And in terms of what I do for a living, I help people with software development projects in whatever way I can. Now, normally that's on the testing side by consulting to help people decide how to do what they need to do, or knowledge transfer so that people have the skills to do what they need to do. And I work on agile, exploratory testing, automation, big projects, small projects, etc, etc. And I've been doing testing long enough that I've been involved in most parts of the process by now. And I've left a trail of work from doing this. So I've got testing websites, compendiumdev.co.uk, EvilTester.com, SeleniumSimplified.com and JavaForTesters.com. And this list will probably grow over time because I'll pull in more influences and more interests. CompendiumDev.co.uk is my hub site. All my professional work, there'll be some sort of link to it from there. General news I add into my Compendium development site news blog. The SeleniumSimplified.com is where I write up the Selenium WebDriver and general automation topics. JavaForTesters.com is the site associated with my book Java for Testers. I post Java related stuff there. EvilTester.com is the main testing blog, so stuff about technical testing or general testing goes there. And when you browse around the Compendium Development's website, compendiumdev.co.uk, you'll find all the information on the books I've written, the articles, the webinars, conference talks, and tools. In fact, there's a promo video in there that provides an overview of all that. The basic tagline I use is, I test stuff and I help people test better. And that's what I do. Through consultancy, training, and working on projects, I help people with their testing and I share what I learn. Hi, welcome to the course. Sorry, there's no there's no green screen. It's just me, the guitar, my room. On this course, I'm going to go through the basics of WebDriver. And by that I mean we're going to cover the API. And there's going to be examples and exercises, and I'm going to walk you through code as much as possible, and we're going to get you to write code. And that's not the same as using it live or using it on the project, but I'm going to do my best to set you up for work in the real world. Because subjects that we're going to cover are the ones that I think you're going to use most in the real world. And I've structured this course in the order that I think will help you best learn it and build on the knowledge that you've got. Best of luck. You are going to cover a lot of ground in this course. We are going to cover a lot of the API. So stick with it, and thank you for signing up. So the aims of this course are really simple. I want you to be able to use WebDriver and Java to automate websites and applications. That's it. That's pretty much the end goal for this. So to do that, I am going to give you a brief overview of Selenium 2 WebDriver and the differences, because that is mandated. Whenever you do any kind of course, you have to have some padding. That is my padding. There is 4 minutes of padding on the history of Selenium and the differences between Selenium and WebDriver. The rest of the course is an entirely practical, all the automation examples of using WebDriver from Java, working within an IDE, writing professional quality tests to handle basic HTML, basic web applications, Ajax-based applications, JavaScript, web forms, and we're also going to, as we go through the course with the commentary on the different lectures, explain how you can go further to read the documentation, to learn this stuff on your own, to follow on actions that you can take. Because I want you to be capable of carrying this stuff forwards and not relying on me or the course, but learning how to be self-reliant with the actual WebDriver documentation that is in the WebDriver code to understand what you do. That's the aim of this course. So at the end, you can automate and you can start answering your own questions by yourself. It's not my intention to spend a lot of time going over the history of Selenium. What I just want to do is give you a quick overview. We have to set some scenes. In fact, it's mandatory. I think legally I am obliged to give you a history of Selenium as part of any training course. I don't think it's going to add much value to you, so if you want to skip this section, feel free, but I'm just going to give you a quick canned history so that you know. Now basically, Selenium is the name of the tool. We have a number of APIs in Selenium. We've got the Selenium RC API, which was the default for Selenium 1. And we have the WebDriver API. Now the reason we have two is because two projects merged to become Selenium 2. First project was Selenium. Selenium was a client-server based application which injected JavaScript in via a proxy and controlled your tests through JavaScript. WebDriver controls the browser directly through drivers hitting events into the browser. Both tools, WebDriver and Selenium, were doing very similar things. The two guys in charge of each of the projects got together and worked out how to merge these tools. Now the Selenium API is fixed and stable. It is now in maintenance mode and will probably not expand or be changed. WebDriver is the new API. All the efforts in Selenium are being done on making that API and that tool set better. The WebDriver API is now being standardized as a W3 standard to allow more driver vendors to take part, to allow drivers for mobile phones, various other things. Now when I started with Selenium, I put forward the Selenium RC API as the easiest one for beginners to use, because it was the easiest one for beginners to use. It was just a big list of commands. It was very simple to get your head around. The WebDriver API requires you to have some programming knowledge, requires you to understand object-oriented programming. When the WebDriver API started, it was undergoing an awful lot of change. You, as a programmer, you had to learn how to keep up to date with the changes, and it was a little bit harder to understand. The WebDriver API is now much, much simpler to use. So what you're going to see now, we're going to concentrate on making it even simpler as we work through it to explain it and help you get your head around it. Now the main differences: Selenium RC has a server. That's why when you download Selenium now, there is the Selenium RC all-in-one server download. That will act as Selenium RC, it will act as the drivers, it will act as everything. It's a very flat API. You can see that when you do command completion. It's a big list of commands. It is well documented, the Selenium RC, because I wrote a book on it called Selenium Simplified, which covers the Selenium RC API. Dave Burns wrote a book, the Selenium 1.0 Tools for Beginners, that covers the Selenium 1 API. The documentation on the website was very good for the Selenium 1 API. Very simple for beginners. Now we are entering the realms of object-oriented programming with Selenium 2. And we will cover that as we go through. But the main points to note are, we do direct browser access. In order to have a server component, we use the remote driver. So we're still using a driver, it's just a driver that connects to a server in order to do its work. Again, that makes things simpler conceptually. The Object API means that some things are hidden in the API until you cast objects down to them. That may not make sense at the moment, but we will cover that as we go through. You absolutely have to, when you're working with WebDriver, connect the source code up in your IDE so that you can view the WebDriver source code to get a feel for its capabilities. But when you use the WebDriver API, there is much more flexibility. You will become a better programmer through using it. You will have to.
I'm just going to quickly go over the theory of the tools that we're going to use. I'm just going to explain the tools and why we're going to use them. Then in the next series of lectures, you'll see me install them, and then we'll start to actually work with them. So we're going to use Java. Specifically, we're going to use the Java SDK, the Software Development Kit, or the Java Development Kit, as it's sometimes known. We're going to use Maven, which is a Java dependency manager and build tool. We're going to use the Firefox browser. We are going to install other browsers, but we'll install those during the course. We're going to use Firefox by default. We're going to use IntelliJ as our IDE, our integrated development environment, the editor and environment that we're going to use for coding in Java. And we are going to install some Firefox plugins, specifically Firebug and Firepath, because they help us work with the DOM as we're doing the automation work. So we want to install a Java SDK. Normally, if you're just a normal user, you'll be using the JRE, the Java Runtime Environment. We need the SDK, the Software Development Kit, or the Java Development Kit, because this has the compiler. And we can tell whether we've got Java SDK installed by typing javac -version at the command line. If that runs, it means we've got a Java SDK, and we'll see what version it is. We should generally just work with the most recent version that's on the Oracle site, because that's where we download the SDK. Generally, if I'm looking for the SDK, I will do a search, a web search for Java SDK or Java JDK. This is the current URL for it, and you'll know that it's the right one when you find it because it's on the Oracle site. We download the JRE from java.com. That's where we do not want to go when we're downloading the SDK. If you go looking for the SDK and you see a site that looks like this, you're in the wrong place and your Java setup will not work as necessary for this course. This is the kind of screen you need to see when you are getting ready. You go to the Java SE, the download part for the SDK. We click the giant download button, then we'll see something like this for the Java Standard Edition Development Kit. Then we'll find the right installation for our platform and we will install that. Typically the installer does not add the JDK bin folder to the path. So when we try and type in javac, it doesn't work. So we need to make sure we do that. And we also need to add Java home as an environment variable that points to the root folder of the JDK. Because this is where tools like Maven and IntelliJ look for the JDK. So we have to add that. We also add Maven. Maven is a standard Java tool for dependency management. That means that we define in a pom.xml, an XML file, we define the dependencies that our code uses. So we would have dependencies like JUnit, we would have dependencies like WebDriver. And when we add them as dependencies, we define what version we want, Maven will download them for us automatically. We don't install WebDriver, we add it as a dependency to our project. It's also a build tool, so I can type Maven and it will build my application. I can type Maven test and it will compile the application and run the tests. This means that we can use it very easily for hooking into continuous integration. The Maven homepage is maven.apache.org, but again I tend to find it by just typing in a web search. And the instructions for Maven are pretty good. The new version of Maven 3.3.9 has improved the install process and made it a lot easier. So when you go hunting for Maven, you'll see a site like this. The documentation is very good. You should read it. The download instructions are quite easy and the install instructions are very easy. It's a very good site to navigate and well worth reading. At the time that I'm recording this video, we now have 3.3.9, which is a lot easier to install. Things to remember are we download the binary.zip file, not the source.zip. A lot of people download the source.zip and then can't understand why it's not working. All we do to install it is unarchive it and then add it to a folder on our drive. It needs to be a folder with no spaces in it, so C:/Maven/Maven version. And we add the bin folder to the path so that we can access the Maven MVN executable. And to check that it's installed, we would do mvn-v and we'd see the version of Maven that's running. On older versions of Maven, just in case you get stuck with one or have to install them, you have to have an m2_home environment variable pointing to the root folder, and that is what allows Maven to work with other applications. So again, when we're installing, read the installation instructions to see if they're up to date with the course. I do try and update them, but sometimes it goes out of line a little bit, but the installation instructions are usually pretty good. If you get any issues, leave comments. We install Firefox. We don't do this just because it's a good browser. We install it because the drivers to work with Firefox and WebDriver are there by default. We do not have to add any other tools. If we're using Chrome, we have to add a ChromeDriver. If we're using IE, we have to add an IE driver. If we're using Firefox, we just download WebDriver and we're good to go. So this is the first browser that we automate against, and that's why we install it very early in the course. We're going to use IntelliJ. IntelliJ has a community edition which is free and open source. That will do everything that you need to on the course. The reason I use IntelliJ is it's one of the best IDEs out there, and every really good professional developer that I know uses it. It has so many shortcuts and refactoring features to make your coding easy, and we're going to show some of that during the course. I support IntelliJ. That's what we use on the course. That's what all the videos you see. If you choose to use Eclipse, then that's fine. It will work. If you choose to use NetBeans, that's fine too. You just won't see any examples on the course, and I can't really support you because I don't use them. I use IntelliJ. We will install a couple of Firefox plugins, mainly Firebug and Firepath, and these are just extra tools to help us as we're building the automation tool, but you'll see those in use and examples of that during the course. There are many different ways that we can install the basic software that we need. Right? The first things we have to install are Java, Maven, and IntelliJ, which is the IDE we're going to use. Now I do have legacy videos in this course that show how to install it using the instructions that are on the web pages for those tools. But the easiest ways to install it are on Windows, using a software called Chocolatey, which is free. It's a package manager, and essentially we'd write something like Choco install Firefox or Choco install Chrome, and it's just an easy way of installing everything. Because when we install the Java JDK and Maven, we have to change the system variables, we have to add things onto the path, and having an installer makes it a little bit easier. So Chocolatey is essentially a version of software for the Mac called Homebrew. Homebrew is just a package manager. So again, in Homebrew we write things like brew install Firefox, brew install ChromeDriver. So once we've installed Homebrew on the Mac, or once we've installed Chocolatey on Windows, and the install instructions are all here, it makes it very easy to get a lot of the development tools we use installed. So I'm going to use that in the next videos to install the Java JDK, Maven, IntelliJ, the ChromeDriver, Firefox driver, just to get the basics up and running fast. Again, we do have instructions in later videos, but they're legacy videos, so you don't have to watch those. This is about trying to get you up and running quickly and easily. And when I'm doing face-to-face training, this is what I use if I have to set up a machine in emergency. It just makes things easy and fast. So this is what I'm going to recommend to you, even if you don't already have this installed. So the Windows installs are going to use Chocolatey. The Mac installs are going to use Homebrew, just to get you ready. Okay, so because Selenium WebDriver keeps updating all the time, which is good for us, right? Because they keep adding new features, they fix bugs, they keep up to date with the browsers. The hard thing is, from a training course, keeping all the versions up to date, and the install instructions can change very frequently. So what I do, on GitHub, I have a project called startUsingJavaJunit, and that has a basic test that we use to check our Java install, but it also has install instructions. So in the speedrun install page, it's got a list of all the steps we're going to do. So you're going to see a video that shows what you have to do, but sometimes that video may not be as up to date as the install instructions here, right? Because creating the videos and releasing those takes a lot longer than simply updating a text file on the GitHub account. So if you get stuck in the install or something doesn't quite look like what you're expecting, have a quick look at the Java install speedrun checklist in the startUsingJavaJunit project. So the videos are usually good enough. The most up-to-date instructions are probably going to be on startUsingJavaJunit. But if you get stuck, give me a shout through the forums or the question and answer prompts, because there's no point sitting there getting stuck for a long period of time when usually a little prompt will get you over the hill, because we want to get you running as fast as we can. So to get WebDriver up and running, we don't really have to install a lot. Once we've installed Java, Maven, and IntelliJ, we're going to essentially use Maven to bring in WebDriver. This is all I really have to do to install WebDriver as a Java library. But to get WebDriver running and communicating with the actual browsers, I need to install the drivers. So on Windows, I need the ChromeDriver, which runs as a separate app, although you'll hardly ever see that because WebDriver is going to run that on our behalf, and GeckoDriver for Firefox. And the same thing on the Mac. We've got GeckoDriver. So we don't have Firefox driver. For Firefox, we use GeckoDriver and ChromeDriver. And on the Mac, we also have SafariDriver. And SafariDriver is built in to the Mac operating system. So you don't really have to install Safari, the driver, if you're on Mac. There are certain things you have to do in Safari itself to get it running, but we'll cover that. So I now have to go away, uninstall these so that I can show you a video of me installing them. And again, I'm going to use Chocolatey and Homebrew to install these because it's faster. But if you want to see the longer way to do it, In the legacy video section, you'll see the older install routines for this, but I do recommend you use Chocolatey or Homebrew to install this just because it's a lot easier. You don't have to worry about putting it on the path. It will just work after you've installed it that way. So again, to support our easy install of this, I do have a project on GitHub called startUsingSeleniumWebDriver, and we're going to use that in the next few videos to check that we've installed WebDriver correctly. The reason I'm pointing that out early is that if the install instructions or the install videos don't quite match what you're seeing because the versions have changed or whatever, the install instructions on the speedrun install are usually up to date. So again, we've got a speedrun install here with written instructions that might help you in the install process, but the videos are probably going to be good enough. But if you get stuck, use the video in combination with this, and if you get really stuck, let me know, because if the videos are out of date, then we want to update them to make sure they work for everybody. Use the forums or Q&A, because again, the install process is the hardest part because you have to debug any issues yourself. And if you're struggling because things aren't quite as up to date as they need be, because I haven't noticed that things have changed in a way that breaks the install instructions, let me know so that I can get it updated. So I have Java installed. Let me do Java C. And I have Maven installed. I have IntelliJ installed. What I do not yet have installed are ChromeDriver and GeckoDriver. So I'm going to install ChromeDriver. I can check whether I have ChromeDriver installed, because if it's installed and on the path, I can run ChromeDriver. Let's just double check. Yep, I could run just ChromeDriver from the path and it will pick up. That's not the way we normally run ChromeDriver. That's just what I use to check whether ChromeDriver is installed and on the path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Chocolatey to install it. If I go into chocolatey.org and look for ChromeDriver on there, what I really want is what's the most recent one. So there's Selenium ChromeDriver. You can see OperaDriver is there because OperaDriver is now based on Chrome, but I want the ChromeDriver. So I need to install Choco install Selenium ChromeDriver. Let me do that. Choco install Selenium ChromeDriver. You're not running from an elevated command shell. I forgot I need to run from an elevated command shell. I will say no, just to make sure. Choco install Selenium ChromeDriver. Yes, run it. Okay, so now not Choco. If I do ChromeDriver, let's see. So ChromeDriver is now on the path and we can run it. So when I go into IntelliJ and run the tests, it should run fine. That's all we have to do using Chocolatey to install ChromeDriver. So on Windows, now I don't have to install ChromeDriver and GeckoDriver. I could just use ChromeDriver and all my tests will run against ChromeDriver. And when you're starting out, that might be a good thing to do so you don't get confused by multiple drivers. In the course, you'll see me type driver.get where we've hidden some of the driver instances, or you might see me do Firefox driver because the course was originally written against Firefox driver. But ChromeDriver is currently, at the point I'm doing this, the most reliable driver, and I tend to prefer to use ChromeDriver now. But if I do want to install Firefox driver, I have to install the GeckoDriver. GeckoDriver is not currently running. GeckoDriver is provided by Mozilla and it's on GitHub. If I want to download it manually, I would go off to the GeckoDriver releases page, download the package, unzip it and add it onto my path somewhere. By using Chocolatey, I don't have to do that. Now you can see here that at the time that I'm installing this, the Chocolatey version is 0.20.1. The actual version that's been released is 0.21.0. So the Chocolatey version is slightly out of date. That might be an issue. I might have to install the main one, but Chocolatey gives me a start. And then I could find out where Chocolatey has installed it and then just override that with the most recent one. But Chocolatey is probably going to be near enough and good enough. So I'm running from an elevated command prompt. So I'm just going to type in choco install Selenium GeckoDriver. Choco install Selenium GeckoDriver. Yes, let's install that. Choco installed. So now, let me just try. I might have to reboot the shell, but let's check GeckoDriver. Alright, so that's running. So now when I load the source code into IntelliJ and try and run it, it should run fine. But that is GeckoDriver installed the easy way using Chocolatey. So now that I've installed the drivers, I already have the browsers installed. If you haven't installed Firefox and Chrome, I'm assuming you know how to do that. Just go off to their home page, download the browsers and install. What I want to do is check that the drivers work. The easiest way for me to do that is to use this project I've set up called startUsingSeleniumWebDriver, and it's on GitHub. So github.com/EvilTester/startUsingSeleniumWebDriver. And I'm going to download the zip file. That's the easiest way to get this stuff happening. So if I now go into the folder where it's downloaded it, so I have the zip file. I'm going to unzip that. So now what I want to do is I want to open that project in IntelliJ. The easiest way for me to do that is in IntelliJ. This is the dialog that shows when IntelliJ starts up. If I say open, that's the easiest way to get a project into IntelliJ, particularly a Maven project. If I just do open, then if I go off to my downloads folder, bear with me, then this is the folder that I've downloaded the project into. I can either click on this root level folder or I can click on the pom.xml file. Either of those will work. What I'm going to do to make it simple is just click on the top level folder, do OK. Then IntelliJ will do its stuff. It will download all the dependencies, which includes WebDriver. Okay. So in the pom.xml, there are lots of comments in here to help. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to double check that the version of Selenium is up to date. So the easiest way for me to do that is it's version 3.13.0. If I go off to seleniumhq.org, in the downloads, it usually lists the most up-to-date version, and it says version 3.13.0. There's the Java bindings 3.13.0. That's what I've got, so I'm up to date. If that said 3.14.0, I would just change the version here, and then it would download the most up-to-date version. But the most up-to-date version is 1.3. If you ever see anything like this in IntelliJ, make sure you click Enable Auto Import. It just makes things easier. So if I go off to the source folder now, in source test java.com EvilTester WebDriver, I'll see that I have got 3 tests here. We've installed Chrome and we've installed Firefox. So I should be able to run this Chrome test. Let me just run this. Right click, run my first Chrome test. And that worked. Now if you scroll down here, you'll see that the code to do this was really simple. Start a new ChromeDriver or create a new ChromeDriver object, navigate to seleniumsimplified.com, assert on the title and quit. We've also installed Firefox. Firefox is the my first test. So I can right click on that and run that. See, it started up GeckoDriver, then it will start up Firefox. Now sometimes you'll see errors like this, severe errors, you'll see couldn't do these are all things that are being logged by the GeckoDriver. The test itself has passed. None of those errors were related to the test. Different versions, when it's run against different versions of the browser, might show different errors. What we are concerned about is, did our test pass? Did the assertions pass? Firefox driver or GeckoDriver tends to throw up more errors than a ChromeDriver, which again is why I prefer ChromeDriver, particularly when you're a beginner. Now we can't run the Safari test because we're not on a Mac here. What I could also do is run this from the command line. Oops. So if I go into the folder that has the pom.xml file, and I get a command line up, I should be able to run Maven, and the instructions to do this, I'm just going to show you, are actually in here in the pom.xml. I'm going to run the Firefox test. So I would type in Maven test -d equals my first test. I'm saying I want to specifically run this test. Now you might get slightly different results running it from the command line because IntelliJ might be set up correctly, but the command line might not fully be correctly set up. Now for the course, if it's running from IntelliJ, it's probably good enough. But if you get issues and you can't run it from the command line, do let me know and we'll see if it's a common problem. We'll create more videos, or we might be able to put something in an FAQ section. But chances are if it runs from the IDE, you're probably fine. So to get the Chrome test running, it was my first Chrome test. Now if I was going to do this from continuous integration, that's what I'd be putting into my continuous integration process. Now IntelliJ also has a terminal in here, so I could do the same thing in here, Maven minus Maven test -d test equals my first test to run the Firefox one. And that should work exactly the same way as running it from the command line. So this means I've got IntelliJ set up, I've installed ChromeDriver and GeckoDriver from Chocolatey, and they're executing against the browsers. So I am set up on Windows now and ready to continue with the course. Okay, so I'm on the Mac. I've installed Java C- version. I've installed Maven. Now you might have a different version of Java, that's fine. Maven -version. That's installed. What I do not have are GeckoDriver, which is the Firefox driver, and I do not have ChromeDriver. So I need to install those, and I'm going to use Homebrew to install those. So the easiest way to do that is if I go off to Homebrew, do a search for ChromeDriver. Okay, so I got a little bit confused there for a second because this said inactive. So I've done a quick web search, and now apparently what we do is we do brew cask install ChromeDriver. Let me try that. Brew cask install ChromeDriver. So now if I type ChromeDriver, I've got version 2.40, which is if I look on the website, the most current version of ChromeDriver. And that's it. So when I install the source code now and run it, I will be able to use ChromeDriver, but that's all I have to do. So that was, rather than brew install ChromeDriver as is listed on the brew formulas, I had to do brew cask install ChromeDriver. And then we get ChromeDriver installed. So if I want to run tests against Firefox, I need to install GeckoDriver. Remember, you don't need to install all the drivers. If you just want to work with ChromeDriver, installing Chrome, if you just want to work with Chrome, which currently I think is the best browser driver combination, that might change in the future, you could just work with ChromeDriver. If you want Firefox as well, then we need to install GeckoDriver. And I'm going to do that through Homebrew. And I can see here on Homebrew, it's an active project that says brew install GeckoDriver. Brew install GeckoDriver, and that should just install it for me. And the way I'm going to check to see if it works is just by typing in GeckoDriver, and that works. So now I have to go off and install the source code to double check that we can run with it, but ChromeDriver and GeckoDriver are now installed. So on a Mac, SafariDriver is already installed, but I have to tell Safari that it's okay to allow it to be automated. So in Safari, if I go up to Preferences, I have to make sure that on Advanced, the Show Develop menu in Menu Bar is enabled. When it is, I've got this Develop menu, and then down here you can see Allow Remote Automation. That is what, when that's ticked, allows Selenium WebDriver to use the Safari driver to automate Safari. That's all you have to do on the Mac to get Safari working, except for stuff in the code. But that essentially now SafariDriver is installed and ready to run. So on the Mac, we've got ChromeDriver installed, we've got Firefox driver, Safari is ready. What I need is source code to allow me to check this. So if I go off to github.com/EvilTester/startUsingSeleniumWebDriver, this is the sample project we're going to use to check our installation. So if I go on to the download a zip, then that will download into the downloads, and I'll have a zip file there. So what I need to do is unzip this. Then that will give me the source code and the folder with the pom.xml. So in IntelliJ, I'm going to use the open option. You can do this from the file menu as well, but it's the open that we want to open an existing project. So I'm going to choose the folder, the top folder, the folder that contains the pom.xml. I could click on the pom.xml and open that. That would work fine. Or I can do the root folder that contains the pom.xml. I'm going to do that. And that will load everything up for me. Any dependencies will need to get downloaded. First thing I'm going to do is check that the version of Selenium is up to date. So on seleniumhq.org, in the downloads, it says version 3.13.0. That's what I've got in here. This is up to date. If that had said 3.14, I would put 3.14 there, and it would download the most recent dependency. Now, in order to run the tests, in the source folder in test Java, com, EvilTester WebDriver, I'm going to right click on the My First Chrome test and run that. This should start up Chrome, visit a website, and check the results. So there we go, Chrome started there and ran the test. I should be able to do the same with Safari because Safari is built in. So there we go, Safari was a little bit slower, but it worked. And here is Firefox. So that worked. The browser appeared on my other screen. Let me see if I can get this running so you can see it. I'm ready to move the browser when it appears. There we go. There we go. Firefox was running and came through. Now, one of the things that is quite handy in IntelliJ is it also has a terminal, which has put me at the POM, because I can run the tests from Maven from the command line. And the instructions to that are actually in the pom.xml. So if I do maven test minus d test equals my first test, that will run the Firefox one. I'm going to do Chrome because it appears in the right place. There we go. And I could run that from the normal command line as well in the root folder where the pom.xml is. So now I've installed ChromeDriver, Firefox driver, SafariDriver is already installed, but I've configured Safari. I've downloaded some test code, so I know that this works. So now we're ready on the Mac to move on to the Nest sections. Now if you want to see the more complicated instructions, it's in the legacy install section, but you can skip over that and just move on to the start creating your own project and start creating our own tests now. So I have a clean Windows 10 virtual machine here, and I'm going to go through the install Java speedrun. So the first thing I have to do is check and see whether Java and Maven are installed. So I check for Java. Remember, I want the Java SDK installed, so I'm going to say Java C for the Java compiler minus version. That's not installed, so I know I need to install the Java SDK. Let's check, see if Maven is installed. Maven is not installed, so I need to install Maven as well. If either of these commands pass, you don't need to install that unless you want to upgrade the version that you've got installed. So now I know that I need to install the SDK. I'm going to go and download the Java SDK. So I'm going to download the most up-to-date version of the SDK that is there at the time that I make this video. I have to accept the license agreement, and I'll take the 102 Windows 64-bit version. Choose the version that is right for your machine. I don't need the demos and samples, I'm just taking the SDK. Okay, now it's downloaded, I'm going to run the install program. Okay, it's going to install it into 1.08.102. That folder is fine. It's installing the Java Runtime Edition as well, so that's useful. Okay, so I'm just going to get a command line up again. Java C minus version. It isn't recognized, so it hasn't added it into the path yet. Let's see if it's added a Java home. Okay, so it's added the JRE into the path, but it hasn't added the JDK, and it hasn't created a Java home environment variable. So I'm going to have to do that. So let's remember where it added the JDK. There we go. So this is the path that I am going to add into the Windows path variable. Let me just copy that path before I forget. I'm going to add it onto the system path. And I want the bin folder. If I go back here, I can bin, this is where all the applications are stored. So I want the bin folder. So I add it like that. And I'm also going to create a Java home. This one doesn't have the bin folder, and hopefully that will help applications discover where Java is installed. So if I OK out of this now, close down the command line so it picks up the new settings. Get a new command line up. And there we go. Java C, so the SDK has been installed. So now I have to download and install Maven. So if I go off to the maven.apache.org site, go off to their download, I will download the binary zip. I don't download the source, I want the binary zip. I'm going to save that. Now to install Maven, all we do is unarchive the zip file, take the files that are there into a folder. The folder should have no spaces in the name. Then we add that folder to the path. So what I'm going to do is extract everything in that zip. I'm going to put it all in C, and I'll call it Maven. So now I've got a C :/Maven, Apache Maven 339. There are no spaces in there. That's good. I can add that into the Windows path. Now essentially all we're doing is following the install instructions that are listed on the site. And the install instructions tell us we need to have Java Home, which we've already done. Then we need to add the bin folder for where we just installed that into the Windows path. So let me copy this, get the Windows properties up, change the settings, off to advanced, change the environment variables, get the system path, edit the path, add a new item onto the path for Apache Maven. OK, if I OK out of all of this now, get a new window up, Maven should be installed. There we go. Now I'm just going to run a test and make sure this works. So I'm going to download the test project from github.com/EvilTester/startUsingJavaJunit. I'm just going to say download the zip. Now if I extract this, go into the folder, I want to be in the root folder where the pom.xml is. Start a command line. There's the pom.xml. So I'm just going to type Maven test. So it's downloading everything we need to run the test. Then it ran the test passed, the build was a success. So I'm going to download the IntelliJ Community Edition, load the sample project into that and run the test, just to make sure that IntelliJ is installed correctly. So I'll go off to the IntelliJ official site, download the Community Edition. Now I'm just going to run the installer and go through the install process. And I'll just run it when we finish. Now I have already downloaded the github.com/EvilTester/startUsingJavaJunit project, and I've extracted that into my downloads folder. So this is what I'm going to open in IntelliJ to make sure it works. So I'm just going to say open. I'm going to click on the pom.xml. Let it through the firewalls. Wait for IntelliJ to finish its initial processing. So let me get the project up. Then I can see we've got the pom.xml. Everything's nicely syntax highlighted, and we can see that this project is dependent on JUnit. So I'm going to go into source, test, Java. In the com.javafortesters.junit, there's my first test. I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to run my first test. And it tells me that it can't find the SDK. So I need to add the SDK to this project. It's come up automatically. So let me add the JDK that we installed earlier. There it is. C, program files, Java, JDK 1.8. Yes, use that. Okay. IntelliJ is finished doing all its indexing, so let's try and run that test again. So this time, it built a project, ran the test, everything was okay. So that means IntelliJ is installed, Java's installed, Maven's installed. We could start coding in Java using IntelliJ now. I'm just going to download a test project from GitHub that will allow us to check whether we've installed Firefox, the Firefox drivers, Chrome and ChromeDriver correctly. So we're over here on github.com/EvilTester/startUsingSeleniumWebDriver. I'm going to download this as a zip file. Then I'm just going to extract it. Since we have IntelliJ installed, I'm just going to open this in IntelliJ. So now I'm just going to add that project into IntelliJ. I'm just going to click on the pom.xml. Let me open up the project here. Now the reason I've come in here first before doing anything else is I'm just going to check that the test project has the most up-to-date version of Selenium. So here we can see that the test project is using version 2.53.1 of Selenium WebDriver. So I'm just going to go off to the Selenium homepage, look on downloads at seleniumhq.org, and we can see that the current version of Selenium is 2.53.1. Now the website here is promoting the Selenium 3 beta, but I'm just going to keep using the 2.53.1 version for the moment. So I don't need to change this. If the version on the Selenium HQ is different and is not a beta version, then we probably want to copy that into the test folder and use that instead. But this version of Selenium is fine for the moment. And I'm going to download Firefox and get Firefox working with WebDriver. Now I have a choice with Firefox. I can either download the most recent version of Firefox, so that would be Firefox 48 or above. If I do that, I have to download and install the Marionette driver. And when I instantiate a driver in WebDriver, I use the Marionette driver. Or I could download the Firefox Extended Release Edition. If I downloaded this, that would be Firefox version 45, and I wouldn't need to download any extra driver because Selenium has a Firefox driver built in. at least Selenium 2.5.3.1 has a Firefox driver built in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to download the most recent version of Firefox and download the Marionette driver. Marionette driver is still being worked on, so isn't as good as the old Firefox driver or the Chrome driver, but it's the way that we will work with Firefox in the future, so that's what I'm going to install now. So the first thing I have to do is install Firefox. And I'll install that from the official mozilla.org Firefox page. So Firefox is running. And because this is Firefox 49, anything that's Firefox 48 and above, I need to download the Marionette GeckoDriver. So this is the official Marionette homepage. What I want to do is download the version of Marionette or GeckoDriver. I'm not using the Selenium 3 beta, so I'm going to download version 0.90. The version might be different when you come to do this. Download the version that's appropriate for your machine. So if I extract this, so we just have a single executable called GeckoDriver.exe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder on the C drive. I'm just going to call it WebDrivers. I'm going to create a folder called Marionette in here. And then I'm going to copy the GeckoDriver into that folder. Now in Selenium WebDriver 3, we can leave this as it's called GeckoDriver. With Selenium 2.53.1, I need to rename this to wires. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this path to the Windows system path so that WebDriver can pick up the driver. So if I copy this, go into the path, edit the path, add Marionette onto the path, close everything down. I'm going to close Firefox and all the browsers as well. So now I should be able to, in the folder where I downloaded the test project, get a command line up. I should be able to run the Firefox Marionette test. So that would be Maven test -d test equals my first test ff48. Essentially this is saying run the test that is for Firefox versions 48 and above. If I run this, this is the first time we're running a test for WebDriver, so it should download everything it needs. Then run. There we go. So that used Marionette GeckoDriver to run tests on Firefox. And that's all we need now to use the Marionette driver in our test code. So now I'm going to install Chrome and the ChromeDriver so that WebDriver can automate the ChromeDriver. So I'll go to the Chrome homepage, google.com/Chrome, and download Chrome. I'll just run the installer and go through the Chrome install steps. Okay, so that's Google Chrome version 53 installed. So what I need to install now is the ChromeDriver. So the current version of ChromeDriver here is version 2.24. So I'm just going to download this download the version for your machine. I'm going to download the Windows one. So in the WebDrivers folder, I'm now going to create a folder for ChromeDriver. And if I open up this, I can just copy ChromeDriver.exe into the ChromeDriver folder. My next step then is to add this path c:/WebDriver/ChromeDriver to my system path. So now I have two of the web drivers on my path, Marionette and ChromeDriver. So if I close everything down, I should now be able to go to the folder where I have my test project, start up a command line, and run the Chrome test. Maven test -d test equals my first Chrome test. So I started up Chrome and it's running the test on Chrome. So that's ChromeDriver installed and WebDriver can work with Chrome. So I'm now going to go back into IntelliJ and run the test for Firefox with the Marionette driver and Chrome with the ChromeDriver from the IDE. So if I look in source, I can see 3 tests. These are the 2 tests we ran from the command line. Let's have a quick look. So this is the Chrome test. It says create a new ChromeDriver, then do these actions with it. So I should be able to run this test from the IDE and it should start up Chrome and execute the test on Chrome. I could also run the test by right-clicking on it in the project and doing run test. If I have a look at the Marionette driver one, you can see that the only difference between this test and the other one is this says Marionette driver, this says ChromeDriver. So I can run the Marionette driver test. Now the other test is if we installed a version of Firefox before Firefox 48, then I would be using the inbuilt Firefox driver. So in WebDriver code with Java, you might see Firefox driver being instantiated, you might see ChromeDriver, you might see Marionette driver. Use the driver for whichever driver and browser you're using. So if you've installed version 46 or 47 of Firefox, you would use Firefox driver. If you've installed Firefox 48 and above, you would use Marionette driver. If you've installed Chrome and the ChromeDriver, you would use ChromeDriver. This is what determines which browser and driver we're going to use to run our tests. So if you see any code and it's using Firefox driver but you haven't installed Firefox driver, just change it to Marionette driver or ChromeDriver, whichever one you've installed, and then it should work fine. All the drivers work the same way. One tip for working with a Mac, it's really useful to be able to right click on any folder in Finder and to be able to say open the terminal at this folder. The way we do that is we have to go into our system preferences, use the keyboard preferences and adjust those. And what we're looking for are the shortcuts. Now when you get the shortcuts open, what you'll see is a whole bunch of different shortcuts in there. What we want are the services. And again, you can see there's a whole swathe of services in there. What I'm looking for are those for the file system. So the files and folders services. And in there you can see new terminal folder, new terminal tab at folder, and given what you've installed, you'll see other options in there. But when I'm working with the Mac, I like to be able to open a new terminal when I'm exploring through on Finder. When I activate those services, I can just go back into Finder, right click on a folder, and then I can do new terminal tab or new terminal at the folder. In order to make it easy to install Java and Maven on the Mac, I'm going to use Homebrew. So if I go off to brew.sh and copy the install instructions from brew into a command line, it will start to install Homebrew. It will download all the files it needs to. All I do is follow the prompts to hit return when I have to. Now once I've installed Homebrew, what I'll do is I'll then use brew to install Java. First thing I do is update brew. It should be okay because I've just installed it, but then I'll type brew cask install Java. Cask is an add-on to brew that is used to download and install graphical installers. So the Java has a graphical installer. This will help us go through the process without having to download it and follow all the steps to install Java. It can be a little bit painful to install Java on a Mac. This just makes everything easier. It will set up the Java home variables, put everything in the right place so that after this finishes, all I have to do is type Java C and I've got Java installed. So I have to type in my password to allow the installation to finish. And that's it. Java's installed. So I can now type java c minus version and it will tell me that I've installed Java 1.8. Now if I do Maven minus version, it tells me I haven't got Maven installed. So I'll just do brew install Maven and it will download and install Maven for me. Now if you want to install this without Homebrew, go off to the Oracle Java site and go off to the Maven site and you'll see the instructions for doing that. So if I get up a new terminal now, I can see that Java Home has been set up and I can now run Maven minus version and I know that Maven is set up. So what I'm going to do now is download a source code project on GitHub from my EvilTester account. I'm going to download the startUsingJavaJunit project. This is just going to allow us to check whether we've got Java Maven installed correctly and run this from the command line. So I open up that project in a folder. I can do Maven test at the command line in the same place that the pom.xml file is. It will download all the different dependencies I need to run the tests and it will run the test. And when I get that build success, that means Java and Maven are installed properly. So I want to install an IDE. So I'm going to use IntelliJ, the IntelliJ Community Edition, which is free. So I'm going to go off to the IntelliJ homepage, which is jetbrains.com/idea. And then I'm just going to download, and I'm going to choose to download the Community Edition for the Mac. And once that's downloaded, I'm just going to start the normal install process, drag it off to the folder, put it in the applications, and we should be ready to go. Now I could do this through Homebrew, but I have to set up different versions for Homebrew, so it's just as easy doing this one through the normal GUI install process because it's very simple. Then when IntelliJ starts, I'm just going to import or open the SampleJUnit project that we downloaded already. That will let me check that I've set up the JDK and everything's working from the IDE. So I set everything up as its defaults. I'm going to import the project, find the source folder that I downloaded the JUnit project into. Now I want the folder that has the pom.xml. I want to import Maven projects automatically, but everything else I'm just going to keep as the defaults. I need to tell IntelliJ where the Java SDK is. So if I click that plus button, choose JDK, IntelliJ should really find it using the Java home variable that was set up when we installed it. So I'll click that, it will recognize the JDK, and we're pretty much set up at this point. So when IntelliJ starts, it refreshes indexes, goes and does stuff online. Then when it's finished doing its processes, I can right click on the test in the IDE and choose to run my first test. Then it will run within the IDE. It's green, we've passed, that means we've set up Java and Maven and it's all running within the IDE. What I want to do now is install the driver to allow us to use Firefox. So I'm going to install Firefox and I'm going to install the GeckoDriver. But to start with, I need to download a project that will help us test this and make sure that we've got everything installed correctly. So on GitHub, I'll download the startUsingSeleniumWebDriver project, which is just a sample project I've written. And then I'm going to import that into the IDE. Same way we've done with various JUnit projects, I'll import the startUsingSeleniumWebDriver project. And I'm mainly doing this just to check that the project has the right version of Selenium WebDriver that I want to use. So I'm going to import Maven projects automatically, take all the defaults. The SDK should be installed because we did that when we were setting up JUnit. And I'm mainly going to look at the pom.xml and check that it references the right version of WebDriver. So this is talking about Selenium 2.53.1. So if I go off to the Selenium WebDriver homepage, which is seleniumhq.org. Now at the moment, Selenium is pushing the version 3 beta. I don't want to use the version 3 beta, I want to use the stable release, which is 2.53.1. And that's the version that's in the pom.xml, so I don't have to make any changes here, so that project is good. So now I just concentrate on installing Firefox and the Firefox driver. So Firefox, I'm just going to go off to the official Firefox download page, download it and install it like any other application. But in order to use it for WebDriver, I have to download the GeckoDriver. Now if I had downloaded version 45, the extended support version, I wouldn't need to download GeckoDriver. I've downloaded the most up-to-date version of Firefox, so that means I need to download the Mozilla GeckoDriver, the Marionette GeckoDriver. Now the install instructions here, it basically says download the executable, then add it into your path. So we're going to download the executable. Now I'm not using version Selenium 3, so I need version 0.9. And I'll download that. So I'm just going to unarchive that and copy it into a folder. It doesn't really matter where you put it. For the moment, I'm just creating a new folder in downloads for my web drivers. And I'm going to copy the GeckoDriver into a Firefox folder so that I know it's the driver for Firefox. Now I'm just getting the path for the folder that I installed it in. Now I'm going to edit my bash profile to export that path as part of the system path. So I'm basically copying in the string that was on the Marionette install page, which basically says export path with the current system path and my path that I've put the GeckoDriver into appended on the end. So if I type in the path that I put the GeckoDriver in, which was /user/Alan/download/WebDriver/Firefox, and add that onto the system path, then WebDriver will be able to find it and I won't have to do any other tweaks or installs when I'm starting off using WebDriver with Java. Now the one thing I do have to do is, with Selenium 3, it will look for GeckoDriver, but Selenium 2.53.1 looks for wires. So I have to rename GeckoDriver to wires, and then when I run the test from the command line with Maven test -d test equals my first test ff48, it will be able to run the test and we'll be able to use WebDriver from the command line. Now we're going to install Chrome from just go off to the official Google Chrome website, download that and install it like any other application. Then, in order for us to use Chrome from WebDriver, we need to download the ChromeDriver. So I go off to the sites.google.com, chromium.org ChromeDriver. That's the official site for the ChromeDriver. It'll tell me what the current version is. Current version here is 2.24. I'll click on that. Then I'll download the 2.24 version. Download the Mac version. Then I'll just unzip it and move that ChromeDriver executable into the WebDrivers folder that we created earlier. So I'm going to create a Chrome folder in here, move the ChromeDriver in. Then all I have to do is add the path where I've put the ChromeDriver into my normal system path. So I'll edit my bash profile again and then just do another export for my Chrome path. So I'll do export path with the current system path with my Chrome downloads WebDriver folder on the back. So then, in the folder that I've downloaded my Start Using Selenium WebDriver project, I can type Maven test -d test equals my first Chrome test. And that will run the test in that project that is set up to use the ChromeDriver. Then Chrome will start, we'll go off to the website, and everything is set up correctly for the ChromeDriver. So now I'm going to install this project into the IDE, or I'm going to run the test from the IDE. This is the final check to make sure everything is set up correctly. We've run the test from the command line. All I'm doing now is reopening the project in the IDE, let it do its indexing and whatever else it needs to do before it starts running. Then I'm going to right click on the test in here and run them. Now, if I had installed Firefox 45 extended release version, I would run my first test. I've installed the most up-to-date version of Firefox and the Mozilla driver, so I'm going to run my first test FF48 from the IDE. So that's worked from the IDE, so the next thing is to try the my first Chrome test. Now there's no reason for these things to fail because we've already run them from the command line, but this is just a double check that we've set everything up in the IDE. Now we're ready to write WebDriver tests. So Selenium 3 has been released. What do I have to do to get my project working on Selenium 3? Well, let's have a look. This is very simple starting Selenium project that I've got on GitHub, github.com/EvilTester, start using Selenium WebDriver, and let me have a look at what I have to do to get this running against Selenium 3. So in the pom.xml, I need to change this to version 3. Then IntelliJ will go and download the right version of Selenium and we'll all get set up. Next thing I have to do, let's check the Marionette driver, because the Marionette driver has been updated for Selenium 3. Let's go off to the downloads, the GitHub release page. So there is github.com/mozilla/GeckoDriver/releases. And we can see that we've got version 0.11.1. So if I download that, I get the Win64 version. Here's one I did earlier. So I've got a wires.exe there. This folder is on the path, so all I have to do is rename these and it will work. I'm going to take the 0.11.1 version and just rename it to GeckoDriver.exe. Now previously, we had to name this wires.exe for WebDriver to work. Now it should be GeckoDriver.exe. Now I have a Marionette test in here. Now you can see that by upgrading to Selenium 3, Marionette driver has been deprecated. There's no real information in there as to what to do instead. But if I run this test now with the Marionette driver, and it could just work. Right, so the Marionette driver seems to have picked up the GeckoDriver. Let's rename that. If it's using that GeckoDriver, it should fail at this point. Yep. So Marionette driver still works. If I rename that to wires.exe, didn't work. If I rename that to GeckoDriver, it works. So when you upgrade to Selenium 3, you can still use Marionette driver. You just have to use the most up-to-date version of the Firefox Marionette GeckoDriver and make sure the driver is named GeckoDriver.exe and not wires.exe. So how does that impact our use of the Firefox driver? So here is a test that uses Firefox driver. This was failing on versions 49 previously. So let's see what happens now if I run this. So Firefox driver now defaults to using GeckoDriver. So if you've got GeckoDriver on the path, or you've told the Firefox driver which driver.executable to use, it will use that by default to execute Firefox. Firefox driver is no longer the legacy driver for Firefox. So what happens if you want to use legacy Firefox versions in the inbuilt Firefox driver? So you want to use something like the Firefox Extended Support release version, which is currently Firefox 45. How do you do that? Well, let's have a look. This is what we do here. What we have to do are set up some capabilities and tell Firefox driver that it shouldn't use Marionette. So we set the capability Marionette to false. We also have to tell it which Firefox binary to use. Right, I have the portable Firefox installed in the tools here. If you had the extended support release version, you can tell it where it is. In fact, if you had the extended support release version installed as your main version, you probably wouldn't need to set the Firefox binary because it will pick it up and use that. But if you want to use Marionette driver on Firefox 49 and have an older version of Firefox installed, this is how you do it. So let's run this. I've told Firefox driver to not use Marionette, and I've told it where the binary is. So it's using the inbuilt legacy Firefox driver, not the Marionette one, and it's using my portable version of Firefox, which I think is version 46. Version 46, and that works. So to summarize what I've had to change, I had to update the pom.xml. The Marionette driver is now named GeckoDriver.exe, not wires.exe. The Marionette driver is deprecated, but still works. Firefox driver defaults to use Marionette, unless we tell it not to by setting the Marionette capability and setting it to false. And those are your initial steps for upgrading to Selenium 3.